So, I hear you're on welfare. Aren't you ashamed? Alice was my wife, but we divorced after she had an affair. Now she's remarried to George, the guy she cheated with. I wonder who told her I'm receiving welfare. It's true that I'm currently unemployed, but I see it as a reward for getting through a tough year. Who are you mistaking me for? I'm not on welfare. What? But you left your job, right? Aren't you on welfare because of that? Ellis seemed more shocked and unsettled than I imagined. I kept a straight face and said, well, I do have assets worth $10 million. My name is John Smith. I'm a 42-year-old ID engineer. You might think it's a stylish and cool job, but my daily life was pretty lackluster. I live far from downtown, so my commute is lengthy. Every morning, I wake up early and spend 2 hours commuting by bus and train. I work quietly, and if I miss the last train due to overtime, I stay at a cheap inn because I can't afford a hotel. I don't drink or interact much with colleagues, so my days end with just a commute between home and office. Once I get home, I seclude myself in my room and develop cell phone apps as a hobby. Some of my apps are already released and used by many. I wasn't into gambling or investing, but maybe buying lottery tickets every New Year's Eve was an exception. I've been doing it for years. Sometimes I won small amounts and felt joy. My life was monotonous and solitary, rarely sharing happiness with anyone. Days would pass, and I'd age. Thinking about it felt a bit lonely, but I just drifted along. In such circumstances, a twist of fate led to my marriage. My wife's name was Alice. She was 4 years younger than me. A few of my scarce friends, concerned about my lack of female companionship, introduced her to me. She seemed plain but genuine. Despite disliking shyness, I felt drawn to Alice. I wondered what she found attractive in me. Alice rarely shared her true feelings, but when I asked, she said she wanted a stable life and a secure future. Both Alice and I had long passed the usual marriage age and felt anxious about our futures. Thinking this could be our last chance for marriage, I proposed, and Alice thought along the same lines. Maybe she would have married anyone who proposed. So we got married and started living in the 2-bedroom house I had rented as a bachelor. I wanted children, but Alice was already in her late 30s, facing the risks of a late pregnancy. It's going to be tough having a child at our age. Imagine our age when the child turns 20. There's no upside to it, so let's not push for kids, she said. I felt disappointed, but her point seemed valid, so I gave up on the idea of children. Without the cost of raising kids, we could manage on my salary alone, but that's only because I led a simple life without expensive hobbies. The woman next door had a beautiful bag. I'd love one like that, a designer bag. Alice said, we don't need something so pricey. There are plenty of affordable bags that would do, I replied. You're really dull, you know that. Is your life even enjoyable? Alice said, according to Alice, the more money you have, the more enjoyable life is. Saying that my salary alone couldn't provide a fun life, Alice started working part-time at a local supermarket. The supermarket opened at 10 o'clock a.m., but she had to be there by 9 o'clock a.m. for opening preparations. Her shift varied, so sometimes when I got home early, she wasn't back yet. On those occasions, I quickly whipped up something to eat using whatever was in the fridge. My cooking was quite popular with Alice, especially when she returned exhausted. I wondered how much Alice was earning since she didn't share her earnings. I had no idea how much discretionary money she had, but seeing her buy several of her favorite brand bags and upscale cosmetics, I guessed she was working pretty hard. I didn't mind how Alice spent the money she earned through her efforts. Sometimes I wondered if we were truly happy in our marriage. I had no complaints about Alice, and she seemed to live freely, but we were not the couple who felt passionately in love. The truth was, both Alice and I felt like we were missing something in our lives. I first noticed a change in Alice about 6 months after she started her part-time job. I didn't have a strong desire to excel at work, so I tried to leave on time without doing overtime. However, due to my long commute, I usually got home around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock p.m. Alice no longer greeted me when I got home. I'm really busy with work these days. The supermarket stays open until 9 o'clock p.m. After that, there's a lot of prep for the next day and handovers to be done. Despite having started the job just 6 months ago, I was impressed that she had become such a valuable team member. Well, that's great you're enjoying your job. We don't have kids, and I can take care of myself. Keep up the good work." Alice replied with a thank you and a smile, and ate the late dinner I had made. One Sunday, while I was cleaning the yard, our neighbor, a gossip lover named Susan, approached me. "Hi, John. Is your wife working today?" "Yes, she hardly gets any days off, but she seems to be enjoying her work, so I'm not worried." "Oh, is that so? If the husband is okay with it, maybe I shouldn't say anything." "What do you mean? Is something wrong with my wife?" Susan looked around nervously to make sure no one was listening, then whispered, "Your wife is having an affair with the supermarket manager. Several people have seen them together." I felt like I had been hit on the head. Alice is having an affair. I had naively reassured myself that Alice, being a plain woman, wouldn't get involved in such things with other men. However, lately her makeup and clothes have become more flamboyant. Perhaps men who like flashy women would be attracted to her, but that doesn't mean I can easily accept such a story. No way. My wife would never do that. I trust her. You're naive, aren't you? Anyone who sees her flashy get-up these days would notice. You should confront her about it. Indeed, Alice had lost the simple charm I loved and had completely switched to a flashy style. If this change was to please her lover, I couldn't ignore it. I immediately confronted Alice about the affair. Alice admitted to the affair without hesitation. "I want a divorce. I love George, the manager. For the first time in my life, I feel truly alive and in love. Marrying you in a hurry because of our rage was a mistake." How could she say something so cruel? Was our married life really that unenjoyable? I thought I had done everything I could for Alice, making compromises where possible, to be told that our marriage was a mistake. Feeling angry, I clenched my fists, trying hard to stay calm. Alice, seemingly indifferent to my feelings, suddenly stood up and went to the bedroom. Unable to bring myself to sleep in the same room, I spent the night on the living room sofa. The next day, Alice said, "We need to cool off a bit," and went back to her parents' house. A few days later, a woman claiming to be George's wife came to my house. "Hi, I'm Linda, George's wife. My husband wants to divorce me, and it seems your wife is the reason." I listened to Linda's story in detail. George and Linda had a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter, and Linda's days were consumed with childcare. "My husband's feelings have drifted away. He says he no longer finds me attractive now that I've become more of a mother than a wife. He told me he wants to live with the person he loves, so we should get divorced." George's selfish logic infuriated me. If Linda and I had done something wrong to our partners, I would understand, but we hadn't done anything wrong. At most, our plain and steady lifestyles led to a lack of excitement. What does he mean by "I want to live with the person I love, so let's get divorced"? For Alice, I was just a boring existence, as Linda was for George. "If we divorce, I will demand alimony from your wife. You should also claim it from George. They'll probably marry each other, but I don't want them to have an easy start to their marriage." I felt the same way. Linda was being discarded by George, and I was being abandoned by Alice. Meeting Linda and talking to her helped me decide to divorce Alice. "I understand. I will also claim alimony from George and my wife. You should do the same, Linda. Money alone can't make people happy, but it's better to have some. Let's seek our own happiness." So, Alice and I got divorced, and Linda did the same with George. Alice and George quietly paid the alimony and child support we demanded. It was as if now that they had found their true love, money didn't matter to them anymore. No words could reach them in their delirium. I just wanted to say, "Do whatever you want." Alice and George moved out of town and started living in the next town over. I threw away everything Alice had used and started a new life. Even after the divorce, I continued living in the rental house I shared with Alice. I didn't want the hassle of moving to a different apartment and thought it best to wait until I was more prepared for such a change. After the divorce, I quit the job I had for many years and started spending my days leisurely at home. I knew the neighbors were gossiping that I quit my job because of the shock of the divorce, but I didn't care what they said. Working on my computer whenever I liked and dedicating myself to gardening when the weather was nice, I spent my days leisurely. One day, the neighborhood gossip, Susan, approached me again. "John, did you quit your job? You're always home during the day." "Yes, I just can't bring myself to work right now. I'm taking some time for mental rest." Susan looked at me with a puzzled expression and said, I see. By the way, someone said they saw you at the city hall. Is that true? Yes, I have been going to the city hall once a month lately. Susan's eyes widened for a moment before she muttered something mysterious and left, saying, Well, see you later. Soon, I started feeling that the neighbors' gazes were different. At first, I didn't notice, but it seemed like they pitied me. Sure, the story of my wife Alice cheating with the local supermarket manager, George, and leaving was embarrassing, and I understood their sympathy if they pitied me for that reason. However, I soon realized it was not just that. There was a rumor about me circulating that I was living on welfare. Susan was the source of the rumor. She deduced this from the fact that I was jobless and always at home, going to the city hall once a month, and still living in a shabby rental house despite my divorce. She theorized that I didn't work because I was getting welfare payments, that my monthly city hall visits were to collect welfare checks, and that I couldn't move out of the shabby house because living in a nicer place would disqualify me from receiving welfare. I just smiled wryly, thinking, so that's what it is, but continued my days as usual. Indeed, I'm not working right now, but I considered it a reward for overcoming the pain of divorce. One day, I went to a shopping mall a bit far from home to buy gardening supplies. After shopping, I sat on a bench to relax and spotted a familiar woman. It was Alice. Alice was dressed in cheap clothes, hardly looking well off, and quickly approached me when she saw me. It's been a while. How have you been? She asked. As I didn't respond, she just sat down beside me. She stared at my clothes, confirming that I was still dressed plainly as ever. With a smirk, Alice said to me, So, I heard you're on welfare. Aren't you embarrassed? I couldn't believe that the rumor had reached Alice living in the next town. After betraying me and causing me so much pain, was she now mocking my misery? The first thing I felt upon hearing her words was that she probably wasn't in a happy situation herself. If Alice were happy, she wouldn't bother about me and would have just passed by. Unhappy herself, she couldn't resist the urge to hear about someone else's misfortune. In other words, she wanted to feel better by finding someone worse off than her. I had heard about Linda's recent situation. After receiving alimony and child support, Linda was receiving every possible allowance and worked hard. She must be living more comfortably than Alice, who was financially strained after paying alimony and child support. So, hearing about Linda probably infuriated Alice, and now she was meddling with me, someone she perceived as unfortunate. Such a poor woman. Suppressing my amusement, I pretended not to understand what she meant. Who are you confusing me with? I'm not on welfare. What? But you quit your job, right? Aren't you on welfare because of that? Alice was more surprised and fled than I had imagined. I did quit my job. Living without working isn't bad, but it would make life boring. Right now, I'm preparing for the next chapter of my life. Once I'm ready, I plan to move out of that rental house. Alice's face turned increasingly anxious. How can you live without working? And I heard you go to the city hall once a month. Isn't that to collect welfare? Susan's notorious gossiping. I didn't expect the rumor to be this detailed. I explained to Alice deliberately. The reason I can live without working is that I have money. My monthly visits to the city hall are for the legal consultations they provide. I've rested enough, and I'm thinking about starting a business. Money? Starting a business. Alice became more confused. Weren't you just a regular employee with hardly any money, and you quit your job? Starting a business. Are you crazy? When we were married, I had given Alice access to all my savings accounts, so she knew very well that I didn't have much money back then. In her mind, if I had money, she wouldn't have left me for George. Keeping a straight face, I told Alice, Well, I do have assets worth $10 million. Alice's mouth dropped open in disbelief, uttering a stunned, What? Yes, I now have assets worth $10 million. Let me explain how it all happened. I think I mentioned before that I have a hobby of buying lottery tickets. I've never gambled on things like casinos or horse racing, but lottery tickets are a kind of gamble in a broad sense. You buy a ticket and get to dream big until the day of the draw. I used to spend about $11,000 a year on lottery tickets, saving up my allowance while married. I gave up buying lottery tickets to help ease the family budget, thinking about our family's future. But after the divorce, such considerations didn't matter anymore. 2 months after separating from Alice, I casually went for a walk and ended up in the shopping district. There was a long line in front of me, and when I peeked, it led to a lottery ticket booth. Oh, the New Year's lottery tickets are on sale now. Feeling an urge to buy due to the long wait, I rushed to an ATM and withdrew $2,000. I handed the $2,000 to the ticket seller, who smiled and said, "I wish you luck." Somehow, it felt like there was a halo around the vendor's head. From that moment, I had a strange premonition and started attending seminars for people wanting to start their own businesses, with no real basis for my actions. To make room for new beginnings, I cleared out old items I had kept for memories. I sorted out the past to start anew for myself. Then, on the lottery draw day, I checked the official website and confirmed that I had won a total of $10 million, including the front and back prizes. Despite my strange premonition, I never really thought I would actually win. The emotions were beyond just happiness or surprise. I probably spent half the day in a daze. Having received $10 million, I tried not to change my life drastically. I kept the win a secret to myself. I didn't even tell my parents about it. I knew that if people found out, suddenly unknown relatives and best friends would appear out of nowhere. Building a mansion would have been a dead giveaway. I decided not to indulge in frivolous luxuries, saving the money for what I truly wanted to do first. As a reward for years of hard work, I took some time to relax. I resigned from my job and spent more time gardening, basking in the sunlight. Gardening turned out to be quite interesting, and my small garden soon bloomed with vibrant colors. After 2 months, I got bored of resting and began looking for collaborators to prepare for starting my own business. It felt like my unremarkable life and the failure to find a good partner were trials for this reward of $10 million. Being able to tell Alice about my assets now was like a reward from God for all the hardships I endured. Another stroke of luck was that the lottery win happened after our divorce. If I had won it while I was married to Alice, she would have probably squandered it. Eventually, Alice came to her senses and started interrogating me fiercely. "Why didn't you tell me you had assets worth $10 million when we were married?" Alice asked. "I didn't have such assets while we were married," I said, but I had no intention of clarifying that. I feigned ignorance and smiled. "So you're saying you wouldn't have divorced me if you knew?" Alice, struck by the core of the matter, stuttered. "Well, that is, you married me in a hurry. Right now that you've found true love, you should be happy with George," Alice screamed in frustration. "Don't joke with me, you big liar." Although being called a liar was slightly irritating, I couldn't help but feel sorry for Alice. I knew she was currently struggling financially. She had been demanded alimony by both Linda and me, and her part-time earnings were taken away, even resorting to borrowing from relatives. Alice twisted her mouth in frustration. "George doesn't have assets worth $10 million. Of course, he wouldn't. It's not common for someone close to you to have $10 million. George now has to pay alimony for both of his kids until they become adults, which means tight finances for almost the next 20 years. As I stayed silent, Alice, looking down hesitantly, began to speak. "I actually regret divorcing you." "Why aren't you happy now?" I asked. "Not at all. Things aren't going well with George. When we both had our families, there was some thrill and excitement every day." "You don't feel excited now?" Alice sighed deeply. "Not at all. We just fight whenever we see each other. Hey John, can we start over?" I was shocked and dismayed at her sudden proposition. "Start over with me? That's quite presumptuous." "I'll change. You don't have a girlfriend now, do you?" Honestly, I was so angry with Alice I felt like spitting in her face. The nerve of her suggesting we get back together after everything. The emotional scars she left on me will probably never heal. "I don't have a girlfriend, but even if I stay single for the rest of my life, I'd never get back together with you." I thought I made myself clear, but Alice wouldn't give up. "Then could you at least lend me $100,000? I'll definitely pay you back. $100,000 is nothing for someone with $10 million. The audacity of the request. I struggled to maintain my composure and keep a calm face. I have no intention of lending money to anyone, especially not to someone who betrayed me. If I had $100,000 to spare, I'd rather donate it to some facility." Alice bit her lip in frustration and muttered softly, "I see. All right, I'll have to figure it out on my own. After saying that, Alice stood up from the bench, her steps heavy as she walked away. Whenever I'm in the garden, Susan almost always appears and chats about various things. Susan's Antoinette is even tuned into what's happening with Alice and others living in the neighboring town. Alice seemed to be having a hard time. She's not getting along with her husband. I also heard that they started living separately the other day. Living separated, huh? Does that mean they're heading towards divorce? Alice really did something foolish. Affairs that cause others misery always come back to bite you in the end. It's like that with celebrities too, right? I'm not sure whether everyone who does such things faces repercussions, but there are certainly people who do. I wonder how they're managing financially after the separation. Is Alice working part-time again? Apparently, she's resorting to cash advances to cover living expenses. Once it reaches that point, it's pretty much over. Her husband, George, was fired from the supermarket and is now working day-to-day jobs. It seems Susan is well informed about Alice and George's financial situation. If someone like her found out, I want $10 million in the lottery, it would cause quite a stir. I planned to keep it a secret while I was in this town and then move to an unknown place when the time was right. Eventually, I'd heard that Alice and George got divorced. Now that she had no reliable partner, she might turn to me again. So I quickly bought a condo in an area closer to the center of the city, far from this town, and moved there. I invested part of my $10 million as capital and started my own business company. I rented a small office and began with just 3 employees, including myself. Not even my closest employees know about my $10 million asset. I believe keeping it a secret is best for maintaining close relationships. The business is doing well, and work is increasing, so I'm thinking of hiring more staff. Being a single company president, I often get introduced to wonderful women by business partners. Once the business stabilizes, considering remarriage doesn't seem like a bad idea. I feel like I'm experiencing a second youth, eager to give my all to both work and love.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.